Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Today, another segment on the line. Yesterday, we talked about Darius Slayton, how he will fit into the Giants offense, especially with the acquisitions of John Ross, Kadarius Toney, and Kenny Golladay. But today, we're going to take a look at the offensive line because that is really the catalyst behind this Giants offense moving forward. And as we know, if they fail, if they don't give Daniel Jones enough time, it's going to be another ugly season on offense. It doesn't matter what weapons you have if your quarterback can't get the ball downfield, if he can't stand in the pocket and operate efficiently. And it really comes down to that interior group because I feel pretty confident about Andrew Thomas at left tackle. I feel pretty confident about Matt Pert and Nate Solder at right tackle. And I feel good about, Nick Gates at center. But those guard spots, that's really what we're looking at and saying, can they hold it up in the interior? Can we depend on them to really be average at the very least? Because that's kind of what it's going to take to maximize the talent that we have on offense now. And of course, having Kenny Golladay, some of these bigger weapons will draw more defenders out of the box. It will draw less pass rushers away. And it'll give the offensive line a little bit more leeway in terms of having to stop 5, 6, 7 guys at a time like they did last year. Now it might only be 4 or 5 guys at maximum. So I think that'll be beneficial. But those 2 guard spots, Anthony, are really up for grabs right now. I would say there's going to be a nice position battle. They don't have much depth there, which is a little bit of a concern, and we'll talk about that. But how you doing today, my friend, as we head into this new segment talking about the interior offensive line?
I'm doing good. I think the offensive line is by far the most daunting aspect of the New York Giants heading into 2021. We feel really confident about the defense. We are really excited about all the improvements that they made with the playmakers on offense. But the one big question mark that remains is the offensive line. Obviously, Pro Football Focus ranked our offensive line dead last in the NFL entering this season. And, that's probably justified because the Giants' offensive line was really bad last year and they really didn't do anything to improve it this offseason. In fact, you could argue that it got worse this offseason as they cut Kevin Zeitler and failed to replace him with anybody quality. So, very concerning this offensive line is, and I'm very, nervous about the outcome of the season based on the offensive line because we have really high expectations for the offense this year after spending all of that money in draft capital on the offense and putting all of these pieces around Daniel Jones. We've got high expectations for him too. But could he be held back? Could the offense be held back by the offensive line? Could that really ruin our season? I guess it is a possibility. And I think it's the offensive guard spot that really makes me the most nervous out of anywhere else on the offensive line because those players are just ginormous question marks and we really have no idea how they're going to play this year. Or if we do have an idea of how they're going to play, our idea isn't that bright. So very, very concerning offensive line situation here for the Giants. But at the end of the day, it's a group of young guys, and if they can rise to their potential, could potentially be a very surprisingly good offensive line and could help us have a really good season.
Well, that's the best case scenario is they do have a really good offensive line, or at least above average. Ranking 31st in the league last year in pass blocking efficiency. They were below average in run blocking, despite that being pretty much the Giants' entire offense last year was running the football. Now we're looking forward. A lot of what the offense is predicated on relies on the offensive line taking a step forward and showing us that they can be adequate. This is what Dave Gettleman promised us week 1 that he was our general manager. We are going to solve that offensive line once and for all. So far, that has been one of the major deficiencies of this team. It might have gotten even worse compared to recent years. So that's kind of a big problem. But as I've said in the past, I am optimistic going into the season for a variety of reasons. History does not have my side on this one, but I'll tell you what, COVID did have a pretty big impact on this offensive line last year. We had 3 new guys playing new positions, in terms of Andrew Thomas at left tackle, Matt Pert and Cam Fleming at right tackle. We had Nick Gates, a first-year center, and then we had Shane Lemieux playing left guard for half of the season. So I think the Giants now are heading into this year with live in-person training, a consistent coach in Rob Sale who's plucked and handpicked by Joe Judge, which should be a tremendous benefit for the continuity of this group. And I think that we're going to see progress. That experience factor. Andrew Thomas having a year of experience. He was only 21 years old. I think he's 22 now, so he gained a little bit more experience physically and mentally. And now he kind of knows what to expect. The Giants faced off against some pretty badass defenses last year to start the year. With San Francisco and, of course, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers. So right out of the gate, Andrew Thomas and those guys were facing some unbelievable talent. And it was a good way for them to get kind of acclimated to what the offense, or rather what the defenses look like at the NFL level, at least some of them. So I think now going into the season, we're going up against Denver week 1. That's another really great defense with a tremendous secondary. We know they have Bradley Chubb. We know they have Von Miller. We know they have some really great pieces on defense, and the Giants are going to have to be able to hold their ground and at least give Daniel Jones some time, especially with such a great secondary. And that's also a big problem, because when you're looking at Denver, if that pass rush gets to Daniel Jones and you have a great secondary like that, he's going to throw interceptions. There's going to be issues in that defensive backfield, that they're going to cause, because if he doesn't have the time, he's going to make rash decisions. He's going to have to process things too quickly, and that's when interceptions and mistakes happen. So they're going to have to be ready. They're going to have to hold it down against two of the best pass rushers in football. So, when I'm looking at Will Hernandez, let's start with him at right guard. At least the expectations that he will make that transition from left to right guard this upcoming season, based on the fact that he's been cross-training with Duke Manyweather, one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. Or rather, he's more of a freelance guy, but he helps some of those really great talents. He really was a proponent in helping Rashawn Slater kind of boost his draft stock and get him prepared for the NFL, and working out with him prior to the draft. So, he's a big part in a lot of guys' plans, and I think that Will Hernandez probably gained a lot of knowledge and benefit from working with him and cross-training at both left guard and right guard. But Kevin Zeitler leaving is a big question. We didn't really do much to supplement his loss. We're moving Will Hernandez to the right side, but I do think that it will benefit him, because the Giants do like to run the football to the right side of the line of scrimmage a lot more than the left side. And I think Matt Pert, if he is going to be the starting right tackle, which I imagine he will get the first crack, we know he's already a good run blocker. The guy added a couple pounds of muscle mass, it seems. He's a huge individual. And you put Will Hernandez next to him, I would just keep pounding the rock to that right side of the line, because we know we have some decent run blockers there. And I really think that Shane Lemieux is going to be that pulling guard. I don't think they want Will Hernandez to be that pulling guard in terms of that power scheme that they run. They don't want Will Hernandez to be that power guard. They want Shane Lemieux to be that pulling guard. And he has the athleticism and speed to do so. If you're running to the right side, and then Shane Lemieux filling in that C gap at the second level or whatnot, I think is going to be a positive for the Giants. I see this transition for Will Hernandez being a positive and not a negative. But again, we haven't seen him play right guard, so it is a new position for him. It is a different little look for the Giants here. So, Anthony, when you're looking at Will Hernandez, what are you expecting from him? Do you think this is going to be a benefit, or do you think it's going to be a negative?
Will Hernandez has been very disappointing the past 2 seasons. His rookie year, we were really impressed. He played really, really well. Played some really good football, but since then, it's all been kind of downhill. Like, that kind of was his peak in his rookie season, which you never want to see. You want to see a player really good in his rookie season and just continue to build on that and grow and become an even better player as the years go on. We've seen the exact opposite with Will Hernandez, which has been really confusing, but this could potentially be the year that he turns it around and actually returns to that rookie year form, or even gets better than he was in his rookie season, because of the fact that he is switching positions. He has been going through some training, and he is just transitioning to a new role, because when he was the left guard, he was the left guard. Now he's the right guard, so he's switching across the line. Maybe that benefits him, plus the fact that he has seemingly lost some weight and looks like he's in much better physical shape. Now that's going to be huge for him, because one of the things with the Giants is they do love to have pulling guards, as Alex mentioned. But the problem is when you have a really heavy offensive lineman, that's why, when we were leading up to the NFL draft, there was that Alabama offensive guard, Deontay Brown, who's like a 340-pound meatball. And a lot of Giants fans were like, oh, he might be a steal for the Giants in the middle rounds. Well, he was never going to be a scheme fit with the Giants, because he's not athletic enough to be a pulling guard, and the Giants require their offensive guards to be athletic. So Will Hernandez losing that weight means he's now going to be more athletic, going to be able to pull as a guard more efficiently and be better in that regard. So that will be huge for him in terms of fitting into the scheme, because it seems like last year what happened with Will Hernandez was he wasn't playing well to start. Then he got COVID and was battling an injury at the same time. Whatever was happening there, he had a lot going on personally. But on top of that, the fact that he wasn't playing well, the fact that he was battling some stuff, and the fact that he just was not a scheme fit is ultimately what drove him out of the starting lineup, because he is a better player than Shane Lemieux. I think we all know that. Shane Lemieux was horrible in pass protection last year. However, Shane Lemieux is pretty athletic. He's fast. He can be a pulling guard. So he ultimately got the start just because he was a better scheme fit than Will Hernandez, because Will Hernandez just did not fit the Giants' scheme at the time. Now, Will Hernandez lost some weight, might be a little bit more athletic, might have a quicker first, second, and third step, getting to the second level. He might be a better scheme fit than he was in the past for this Giants offense, and so therefore he might actually be a much improved player now that he's lost that weight and can fit the scheme better. With Shane Lemieux, though, and Will Hernandez in tandem, it's going to be really confusing to see exactly what happens there. Like, should Shane Lemieux actually be a starter? I personally feel after last season that he shouldn't be. But another point that I'll make with the athleticism of the offensive lineman, when we talk about Will Hernandez, one of the things that we loved, like really loved about Nick Gates in his rookie season was how athletic he was. I remember he was playing right tackle or right guard, and he was pulling across the line of scrimmage. He had that one key block as a pulling offensive lineman against the Miami Dolphins that sprung Saquon Barkley for a touchdown, and I think week 16 of that season. So that was one thing that we noticed with Nick Gates. We fell in love with his athleticism and his ability to be a pulling offensive lineman. The Giants then fell in love with his athleticism too, made him the starting center this past season. He played really well there, showed a lot of promise and showed a lot of improvement towards the second half of the year. So the Giants clearly put a strong emphasis on athleticism with the interior offensive linemen, and I think that's a trend we're going to see going forward. So whether Shane Lemieux even does stick around long term as the starter of the Giants, keep an eye on athletic offensive linemen in next year's draft, next year's free agency period, or anytime this season. If you don't think that the scheme is working right in the run blocking game, expect the Giants to make a switch to an offensive lineman that is more athletic. And I do think Will Hernandez is going to be more athletic this year because he lost that weight. Therefore, he should be able to bounce back and have a better season than he did last year.
I think that's really where the Giants are going to. They're really going with more interior guys that are athletic, that can move, that can pull and trap in the run game, and really get out for screens. You know, I think that's another thing when it comes to offensive linemen. It's very rare to find an offensive lineman with high-end speed in context with how big they are. That also is powerful. It's really hard to find those guys. I think Will Hernandez actually is the prototypical offensive lineman. Now that he's lost a couple of pounds, he's the prototypical guard, in my opinion. I just think his fundamentals have been off. He had COVID last year. He was injured, according to Duke. So that is a reason that he did struggle in 2020. I think he's going to take a step forward. I've been pretty bullish on Will Hernandez lately, and I think, he's bound for a breakout season. It's just like we've been waiting and waiting and waiting. He had a good rookie campaign. He showed kind of close to that in his second year, and then last year just kind of fell off a cliff. And I think we need to see that true breakout year. And of course he would do it in the final year of his rookie contract, right? That makes the most sense. Everything's on the line. You leave it all on the field, and that's how it goes. He's going to get paid after that. So I could see him having a very good 2021 season. Now, my biggest concern for this offensive line is Shane Lemieux, and I think Anthony would agree with me there. I don't like handing out, starting jobs to players. I loved what the Giants did at wide receiver this offseason because they provided competition for guys like Darius Slayton. They provided competition with John Ross, Kadarius Toney in the slot with Shepard, and, Kenny Golladay on the outside. We're not just handing out starting jobs anymore. Make these players earn them. That's how you get the best out of every single player. You make them earn their position. You don't just give away starting jobs all the time. And I think the Giants need to do that at guard because right now we have Shane Lemieux, who was the worst pass blocker in the NFL last year, according to most people. So it was, I don't know. I feel like they might want to consider bringing in a free agent if they can. I know Trey Turner is available. James Carpenter, a former Falcon, he was decent last year. There's a couple of okay players they can bring in to at least compete. The question is, do they have the money to do it? After preseason cuts, they might. It's definitely possible. If they cut Sam Beal, if they cut a couple guys, Levine Toilolo might not make it. Who knows? Some guys that have no dead cap, there's a 100% chance that some players will be cut and they can roll that money over to a one-year deal for another guard. And I don't trust Zach Fulton to be a starter, considering he allowed the most sacks in the NFL last year. But we know that statistic can be skewed in some ways. But I'll tell you what, I would be 100% on board for bringing in another guard to compete with Shane Lemieux and Zach Fulton. I think Will Hernandez kind of has one spot already locked up. I don't think there's much of a competition there at right guard. But left guard, I'm not really okay with just giving the starting job to Shane Lemieux, even if he's been showing up at the facilities at 6 a.m. with Jonathan Harrison, which he has been doing, and I really, really appreciate the work ethic. But based on last year's performance, how much better can he really get in one offseason? Some players have done a tremendous amount in terms of progression, but I don't expect him to be great, let alone good next year. Average would blow my mind. So with that being said, I would be fine bringing in Trey Turner to compete with him. I'd be fine bringing in another option who, at least was average in the past, to come in and try and help out. So that's kind of how I feel about Shane Lemieux. He does have that athletic nature that the Giants do like in their interior offensive linemen, which is unique. They do want those guys who can pull and trap and get out in the screen game and use their speed. So that is one factor that does benefit Shane Lemieux. but his technique is awful. He always has his head over his knees. He's always off balance. He's not really strong enough to handle some of those big interior pass rushers, and those guys are huge. Those Chris Jones of the world, those Leonard Williams of the world. It's really tough. So I think at the end of the day, the Giants need to continue playing their game, but Shane Lemieux has to be take another huge developmental step forward if he's going to be that long-term solution at left guard. Anthony, what are you thinking in terms of him being at least giving some competition with Trey Turner and maybe bringing another free agent?
Yeah, I think most of the listeners of this podcast know I'm not a fan of Shane Lemieux. I don't think that he's earned a starting job. His performance last season does not warrant being a starter in the NFL. He was a fifth-round rookie, and he played well, I guess, for a fifth-round rookie. You could be happy about the fact that a fifth-round rookie stepped in and started as many games as he did. But ultimately in pass protection, he was horrible. He just did not look like he was ready to play in the NFL yet, and that would have been fine if he wasn't the starter. If he was a developmental backup like he should have been when he entered the league, I'd be okay with him on the roster, and I'd be excited about him as a future prospect for this team. But unfortunately, he's pegged in as a starter because we have such a lack of depth at offensive guard. Now, do I think that we should add someone else before camp to compete? No, I personally don't. I think the way that the money is set up and the way that the Giants' offensive line is as young as it is and the way that it's set up, bringing in a guy like Trey Turner in July is not really something that I'm interested in doing. Personally, what I would rather see the Giants do, let those guys compete. Hernandez, Lemieux, Zach Fulton as well. Zach Fulton's your veteran on the offensive line at the guard position. I actually do think people are sleeping on him. I think that he could potentially take over for Shane Lemieux when it's all said and done, just because he is a little bit more consistent and a little bit closer to average than Shane Lemieux was last season. Because Shane Lemieux was very far below average by every metric, every statistic, everything. He was far below average. And if you go watch the film, you'll see him get whooped in pass protection consistently. He was a below average player. At least Zach Fulton was somewhat closer to average. He wasn't average, he wasn't above average, but he was closer to average than Shane Lemieux was. And he is a veteran, so you know more consistently what you're going to get out of his performances. So I think Zach Fulton actually could potentially become a player that plays a lot more than people are expecting him to for the Giants this year if Shane Lemieux continues to struggle. But on top of that, the reason I don't think that the Giants should go out anytime soon and sign a guy like Trey Turner, any veteran offensive guard, is because we just mentioned how preseason's coming up and there's cuts coming up. That's when I would look for an offensive lineman, when there's cuts. So basically at the end of preseason, you're probably going to see a third or fourth year player who's an offensive lineman that showed promise in the past but struggled the past year and then got beat out by somebody else on the offensive line, get cut. You'll see a pretty decent player that at one time had really good potential get cut. That happens every single year. The Giants this year just need to pounce on that player. They need to get him in. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Work the waiver wire in the end of July or, really in the middle of August, like when preseason cuts are happening, like way at the end of this whole offseason period. That's when I think that the Giants should look to maybe add some depth. Right now, bringing in Trey Turner, what is that going to do? We don't even practice till the end of July again anyway. Like, there's no real training camp until July. So let's just wait till then. Let's let the guys that we have on the roster play, build some chemistry, learn from these coaches, see how they do. And if a really good opportunity presents itself during the preseason cuts, then that's when we should take a chance on a guy, sign him, and see how he does. Maybe in practices early on, and then see if he can be worked into the starting lineup early on in the season. That's how I feel about adding talent at offensive guard. I don't think we have enough talent, but I don't think that there's enough talent just out there for us to gain any significant improvements from. So I'd rather just wait, because you go spend the money now on Trey Turner, and then somebody decent gets cut in preseason, and you think, oh man, I wish we would have just waited for that guy rather than wasting our money on a veteran like Trey Turner, who was really, really bad last season, was really good in the past. I understand that. Trey Turner has had a great NFL career, but at this point, there's a reason that he's not on a football team right now. There's obviously a reason for that. I'd rather just wait for preseason. Plus, Trey Turner might still be around in the preseason. He might still be around before week 1 rolls around. Maybe you can sign him then. I'm in no rush to do it is basically what I'm saying. And I'd rather keep all of our options open rather than just saying, oh my God, we need an offensive guard. Let's sign Trey Turner or whoever right now. And then basically setting yourselves up to not be able to sign someone better in the future. Let's just keep the options open as long as we can until about August or July, whenever, probably August, maybe even September, like the first week of September before the first game. Let's wait as long as we can, see just exactly what the offensive guard market is before week one. That's personally the route that I want to see the Giants go, and I do think that's the route that they're headed. Either that route, or they're just headed towards going all in on the two young offensive guards that they have, Shane Lemieux and Will Hernandez. And if that's the case, I just really hope that the Giants' new coaching staff with the new offensive line coach can turn things around for those players and really improve them as young players that can hopefully reach their potential this season.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what they should do as well. That makes the most sense, because at the end of the day, there's always a couple of good quality players that are cut after preseason cuts or after training camp cuts, and the Giants have the luxury of waiting right now. And last year, think about what they did with the secondary. They realized that they had a deficiency at cornerback, and they went and traded a 7th-round pick for Isaac Yiadom. You never know what they're going to do. They could always trade a draft pick. They added a couple for next season in this past draft, so you never know what they could do there. They can sign a free agent. There's always guys that are being cut, and there's going to be some decent options available. And I'll tell you what, they will have the talent to compete with Shane Lemieux, because I don't see him as an above-average player, let alone an average player yet. So anyone that they bring in that's half decent will probably compete with him for that starting job, and Zach Fulton as well. So I think that they're going to make a move as well in the coming months. It's just a matter of when, why, and for how much, and what player it is, and really what position. So we'll see how this progresses as we move forward, my friend. But I think that you're spot on. They're going to get more athletic in the interior. This offense really relies on the success of the offensive line and protecting Daniel Jones, bringing those fumble numbers down, giving him time in the pocket, especially week 1 against Denver, a big challenge. They need to walk away successful from. They need to start the season strong, and I think that offensive line needs to set the stage for the rest of the year with that week 1 performance against a good team. So I'd love to see them really stand up and have a tremendous performance against Denver. My friends, thank you so much for tuning into Fireside Giants, hanging out with us while we talk about the interior offensive line, Will Hernandez and Shane Lemieux. Let us know in the comment section on YouTube, if you're listening over there, what you think about these two players. Are they capable of holding it together? Are you optimistic about one, bearish on another one? I'm interested to see what you guys think about this, of course. So let us know what your thoughts are on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe below if you're on YouTube, and turn the notifications on for Apple and Spotify, my friends. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.